All right, welcome. We're going to look at, in this video, we're going to look at understanding simple language techniques and really moving beyond the identification stage and really understanding how they are used and what effect they really do create. So really being able to not only understand or identify what they are, but be able to use them effectively in comprehension, actually be able to discuss them effectively as well. Alright, so not only do you actually need to be able to discuss these, as I said, you also need to be able to talk about the effect they create. Alright, so we'll start with alliteration, and we'll pretty much just go through each one by one. And alliteration and assonance are usually used to alter the rhythm of a piece of writing or help to create a pattern. Now, that's the way you really need to look at it. It's a pattern of sounds, and it's a pattern of really syllables which are follow the same letter or the same letter sound. The effects of these patterns vary, but they can often affect flow, particularly by having something that has a lot of the similar syllables in it, so either slows it down or speeds it up depending on how it goes. It provides the emphasis and also allows you to be able to use sounds in different ways. And allows an author to be able to create not only a text which creates character through language, but creates character through sound and if you read aloud. So alliteration is particularly important then for things like poets and speakers. And what this does is it creates sharp and meaningful messages. So if you hear a speaker speaking with a lot of different alliterative or with assonance in their description, then really what they're doing is they're speaking in such a way where they're able to convey a message using very distinct patterns and very really strong sounds. So think of it this way, that really provides a very strong sound, and it's something that really entices and really gets the audience involved. Okay, so hyperbole is another technique which helps to create drama and impact into a text. Now, it can be really used to develop some very strong feelings. So if you look at that image there as an example, for instance, then yes, a shark attack will probably be fairly dramatic on its own without any form of exaggeration whatsoever. But the one thing about it is if you make it even bigger, it becomes even stronger, the effect, or if you make it seem bigger than what it actually is. So if you say my life was on the line and it's only a tiny little shark that could barely bite through an electrical cable, then you're probably exaggerating a little bit, but it makes that story seem a lot more gripping and a lot more dangerous, even though it doesn't actually have that sort of danger or fear in it. Yes, hyperbole often goes hand in hand with lying, but the one thing about it, even if you are just stretching truth rather than out and out lying, it does really help to have or to create strong feelings. And certainly any argument which uses exaggeration is really trying to get a strong emotional feeling to come out of it. It is something that replaces a literal or a factual description. So yes, it is in a sense lying, however, it can be just used as a figure of speech. And it creates interest or a connection with audiences, because suddenly if you have like a story about a very, very small shark, for instance, attacking someone, not very interesting. If you create it in such a way where it becomes exaggerated and it's a shark, it's in the water, and you can tell it in such a way where you exaggerate how dangerous the shark is, then suddenly people become interested in that story. And they want to read on to find out what happens, because they know what happens when big sharks get in the water, so maybe this tiny little shark may have a ray gun underneath it or something. So that's where the interest and the connection is created through. It's being through manipulating, I guess, our own emotions and our own sorts of even believability. And that's the downside of using hyperbole too much, is that after a while it stops becoming believable. It's often used by media, advertising, and storytelling to get a reaction from audiences as well. So by using exaggeration, it essentially helps to make something that is not as interesting become a lot more interesting. And that's what hyperbole is trying to do. So if you see it, then those are the effects that it's trying to create. Okay, so tone and mood is another aspect of text which really all texts need to have. And the reason why all texts require a tone or a feeling of mood is in order to get their message across and to maintain this message. Okay, so to keep people interested after they've become interested the first time. Texts which alter their tone and go back and forth are often ones that are unsuccessful. And the reason for that is because they automatically, audiences tune out when that happens, and suddenly the mood that's created doesn't really capture them anymore, and they move on and they're not really quite entranced by it like they once were. So tone and mood are really necessary and are very good indicators of how well a text maintains interest. And ultimately, that is what the relationship between tone and mood is trying to do, and it's trying to connect to a certain emotion, a certain set of feelings. So really, whenever you're discussing tone and mood, you'll be discussing feelings. They utilize these feelings and emotions to absorb the reader and to connect with them. So once it starts to connect with them, it needs to maintain that connection. If it starts off as being a sad piece and then suddenly becomes happy, then we really lose that connection we had to start with. And unless it regains it with the happy moments, it's not going to continue to maintain the audience like it once was, and it may cause an audience to lose interest in it. And tone and mood can also be used to create things like atmosphere, suspense, humor, and drama. So particularly things like atmosphere and suspense are particularly important, especially in terms of suspense. Now, suspense is one of the most important qualities a good story can have. And so by creating something where you're sort of on the edge of your seat, so to speak, texts have the ability to be able to entrance and to continue to maintain a relationship with their readers and their viewers. So suspense is a particular one which is a very strong effect. But these ones as well, especially with something like a sense of humor, for instance, it's one of the things that's also very strongly gets an audience to stay with a text. Imagery is also another aspect which is really important. Virtually all text will have this as well. It is a way that a text represents something, and like we've used with our examples before, really it sort of looks at how a text actually maintains that relationship with the reader. Because they can represent these sorts of things: ideas, emotions, concepts, physical things that we can see and how we should be seeing them. All right. So if I was to describe this house, for instance, and I was to do it in a particularly morbid way, then I might use a collection of imagery that could make this place seem like a haunted house. So I could talk about the dull brickwork and the balconies and the way that the windows always appear shut. And by assembling those images together, what you create is something which on the surface may look like a normal house, but once you start really piling those images together, you start to create this effect that, well, maybe it's haunted, maybe it's mysterious, maybe it's a death house, whatever it is. So by having those images together, you can actually create something out of a fairly normal, fairly standard image. And it's what good writers are really able to do quite well, is to be able to really represent an ordinary thing as something really much more exciting. And that ultimately captures a reader's attention and really gets them involved in the story. And obviously takes away the ordinary aspect of the text and really makes it something else. So imagery is one of the most important aspects of really generating interest, and certainly when you're discussing how it would represent a theme or how it represents an idea, imagery is a substantial part for representing any kind of idea. Okay, so now we're going to look at repetition and rhyme. Now, repetition and rhyme are structured in much the same way as in how they're written in the text, that they go into a logical sequence. But in this case, we're going to discuss them separately, and we're going to start with repetition. Now, repetition is mainly used to reinforce an idea or return us to it. In other words, to simplify it and to really make it stand out. So it reminds the audience of what is important, and it can help to simplify a message in a memorable way. So really what it does, by repeating it over and over, first of all, it really stands out as being, okay, we really must do this, but also it really it simplifies in such a way, it makes an argument much, much stronger, and really ultimately gets the audience involved in the message. Rhyme, on the other hand, achieves a different effect, but as I said, much the same way. It links two ideas together and creates a pattern. So it creates a pattern of sound, and it ultimately links and drives, I guess, the reader through the passage or the poem or the song, which is usually associated with. So it uses that sound pattern in order to connect certain ideas together, and also creates this effect that when you do read it, it sort of has a rhythmic pattern to it that allows it to flow in a certain way, certainly speeds you up or slows you down depending on what the rhyming pattern is and how it's set out. And it's combined with elements of structure and elements of a poet's particular style or a songwriter's particular style, in that it also will drive a reader through the text. Now, both represent strong and memorable ideas, and that's one thing that both of these do have in common, is it makes ideas more memorable and certainly appeals to, I guess, that element of our brains which really do respond to strong messages and messages which are played rhythmically or with sound. And repetition is often used for that purpose in things like speeches and arguments, for instance. So especially in debates, you'll see arguments being repeated a lot, and that's to reinforce them and to return whatever evidence has been given back to that idea or concept. Rhyme is in poetry and song, and while you may not look at so many songs, you'll definitely be looking at poetry and really look at how it makes a poem memorable, is usually through the way that it rhymes, the way, if it does rhyme at all, and the way that pattern really guides you through the text and the concepts and the ideas that are in that poem. Okay, moving on, and the final one we'll go look at here is onomatopoeia. Now, it may not appear to have much effect, but what it really does is it represents sound where sound can't be heard. Now, as it is a textual feature, is a feature which is exclusive to text, it represents sound where sound can't be heard, and that's a really important thing to have, because with that you can add another sense to what is being written, and you can describe another sense in a very vivid sort of way. So by having those sounds in there, it sort of breathes a lot of life into the piece. It creates atmosphere and mood. It plays along with those ideas to really help fill, I guess, our minds with more than just visions and visions piled upon each other. By having things like onomatopoeia, for instance, along with sensory language, what it does is it starts to really engage all of your five senses and not just the main one of sight. It also helps to give a story life, energy, emotion, and realism. All those things together. So by having those, you can really add interjections. So for instance, if you want to add a loud noise, you can put a loud noise through onomatopoeia in there. It creates emotion, particularly when you start building it from softer sounds to much louder sounds, and realism as well. It really, as I said, it brings into another sense, and it allows you to not only see what's happening but hear what's happening as well, and engages it much like you would if you're watching a film, for instance, where you can be absorbed with two different types of sensory language which are driving you through that text. The onomatopoeia achieves much the same effect. So in summary, ensure really what each technique does, and the point of all this is to not only actually be able to identify these techniques, but to really understand the effects that they create so you're able to really discuss them. So if you're discussing a text and you're pulling out these techniques, then you really need to be able to discuss what effect they're able to create, and not only what effect they're able to create, but really why they're important and why they create meaning. You need to understand how it develops this meaning and a connection with its audience and how it creates an effect. And the more you do this yourself, the much easier it is for you to be able to discuss it independently of having to study it. And it also means that you have a much more sound and competent knowledge of these different ideas and these different techniques. And you're able to apply that knowledge as well. But otherwise, that's it for understanding simple language techniques. So until next time, I'll see you later.